Revolution.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution.
Uh-oh.
$100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning, how to do everything website, all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What are we doing live?
Get it going. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go! Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. It is 10 p.m. Thursday evening, and we are here live on Studio A. Yeah, you've waited all week for the most cutting-edge topics and guests, and now it is time to deliver. That's right, it's the Stephen D. Kelley Show with your host, Stephen D. Kelley.
Okay, hello everybody. Good evening. Happy Thursday. Welcome to my show. I am your host, Stephen D. Kelley. This is the Stephen D. Kelley Show. Tonight I have Scott Rickard here, and he just joined us, and he gave us a scare. He likes to give us a scare. He shows up right at the last minute. Oh, my gosh, Scott. Jeez Louise. Glad you're here. Anyway, if you missed the show last week, Scott was on, and I asked him to come back because it was just such a great show. We had such good numbers, and there's so much information, and I think he is perfectly qualified to address a lot of the issues that are going on today. You know, obviously there's a lot going on today, and we're going to go off on this stuff. So we're not going to be talking too much about you, Scott. We're going to be talking about the events in the world because I think you are definitely qualified to talk about this. I'll bring him in here and introduce him. He's standing by listening. But before we do that, I want to remind everybody that we are listener-supported radio. We do depend on your support. Please go to our site support page. There is a link on the oh my gosh, my I can't believe this. Oh my gosh, looks like my here it is, Revolution Radio. Good, I got back in the chat. Anyway, we do. There is a site support button on our homepage, which is www.freedomslips.com. If you are listening to the show on a computer, you might want to consider going into our chat room. We have a very nice chat room with lots of fun people in there that keep us on our toes. And if you are a first-time listener, I want to welcome you. We're very happy to have you here tonight. If you are a regular listener, thank you for your support, and I'm very happy to have you here back tonight. And I also want to welcome everybody in the chat. Let's see what else. Okay, also, we have a Facebook page for Freedom Slips that I would like to see people join in a little faster numbers. We just passed 3,400. I think we're about 3,420. That means we picked up about 20 people since last week, which is probably not quite as many as I'd like to see because I know there's hundreds of thousands of you out there. So please, I'd really like to see more of you join our Facebook page. I also have a Facebook page with room for a good 950 people at least, so I'm sure, I'd like to, it'd be awful nice if more of you would join me on my Facebook page. Let's see, what else? Quick advertisement for my book. If you want to know about me, you want to know why I do what I do have a book out that's available right now on Amazon Kindle. If you get the book, you're helping me to support you're supporting me, but you're mostly helping me to get my message out there, and hopefully if there's a lot of good stuff in there that will shock you and hopefully wake you up, and once you get it, you can share it with your friends, and because I do have the share mode enabled, so it's and it's only $7, so no big deal. Anyway, okay, Scott, how are you doing? Are you with us?
I am. Thanks for having me.
You scared me, man. I should have got your phone number. It's like, anyway, it's 10 o'clock where you're at, right? So what were you doing?
I was actually sleeping to the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2.
Oh my gosh! All right, I'm assuming you've got kids then watching that, because I don't think you'd be watching that just for fun yourself, were you?
Yeah, I think I got a little high on my ice cream sandwiches.
Ah, all right. Hey, well that sounds fun. Lucky you. Gosh, it must be nice. Anyway. Again, if you didn't hear Scott last show, he is a former intelligence analyst, a linguist for the NSA, amongst other agencies. So he's very well qualified to discuss international events, and he has quite a following on Facebook himself. He's got like 5,000 friends and a lot of followers, so I can't have you go join his page, but you can follow him if you go to Facebook. I'm sure there's room for you to become a follower at least. Anyway, Scott, I don't know if it's necessary to really go into too much talking about anything that we talked about last week as far as your background and all that. I know we covered your history, but I'll tell you, today seems to be a very significant day. And let me just go over some of the things that happened on this date, and correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously we had a significant plane crash in the Ukraine that we're going to need to discuss. On this date, supposedly Flight 800 was shot down, and on this date also JFK Jr. was shot down. And what might seem unrelated, but I really doubt that it is, on this date Disneyland opened its theme park here in Anaheim, California. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
Yeah. People have been saying that there's it has something to do with the 7. I mean, this is the 7th month of the 17th day of the 7th month of 2014. So there's lots of increments of 7 in there. And I think this plane that got shot down was what, a 777 or something like that?
I don't know if it was.
Well, I know there's some speculation. Some people try to say it was a 747, but either way, there's lots of 7s in there. So that's kind of from a numerology standpoint, that's kind of interesting. But I mean, clearly we got to talk about this, the plane crash, because, it just seems that I've been saying this on Facebook, but it just seems that the powers that be, or these psychopaths that, control the Western powers, seem to be hell bent on starting World War III. And, we had John McCain bellowing, that if it's shown that Russia had anything to do with this thing, there will be serious consequences. I mean, oh my God, as if Russia had any reason to shoot down a airliner on its way to Malaysia. And again, Malaysia, of course, is a country that is Muslim for the most part and does not recognize Israel, but does recognize Palestine. So clearly there seems to be some punishment going on. You have anything you want to say about that?
Well, it's all good stuff. I mean, the problem that you have there is that, there is a war going on in Ukraine, obviously instigated by the oligarchs that have controlled the financial systems around the world for, a couple hundred years. And these folks are tied into the colonialism, including Israel, as well as other places. And this is a fortuitous thing for them to put Russia in a sort of in the crosshairs, but it could also have been an accident as well. There's a lot of activity going on in the area, and obviously somebody has access to surface-to-air missiles, and there's a whole lot of people that could have fired at that thing. So there's a lot of questions to ask, and certainly no no reason to escalate things, from my opinion. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. It gives the press everything that they need to create these scenarios that work best for the folks that are pulling the puppet strings.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been reported that the junta moved in advanced surface-to-air missiles into the vicinity just within days, of this happening. And obviously, the people in the eastern Ukraine don't have such surface-to-air batteries, so it's pretty likely. And then, of course, there's also people saying that they suspected that this was an attempt to shoot down Putin's plane, which allegedly was in the area, at some time. But and then so surface-to-air missile, or then we're also hearing that it could have been shot down by Ukrainian aircraft. Lots of speculation going on there.
I think it's important to understand, too, is that in Ukraine, this is probably one of the most corrupt countries when it comes to dealing with arms and weapons, and they manufacture an incredibly successful tank program, and that particular armament isn't even used by the Ukrainian military because it's so profitable, and the Ukrainian military has really been fleeced of most of its decent military and sold off just to basically survive financially. So, to obtain a surface-to-air missile in the Ukrainian market is, is not as easy as buying a weapon, in the United States and other areas of the world that, have pretty, I'd say, liberal gun laws, which I'm not against, but I'm just saying that surface-to-air missiles, passing those out willy-nilly is pretty hopefully going to be a little better controlled in society. But in Ukraine, it's absolutely uncontrollable. This is the homeland of a guy mentioned on the show last time, Semyon Mogilevich. And this is the king. He's the kingpin of global organized crime, what a lot of people have referred to as the Red Mafia in the past. So this is the kind of area that you're operating in. So anybody that would be interested in obtaining a surface-to-air missile that had the right connections and their amount of money could easily do so in that area.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would suspect, this reminds me of that movie, Nicolas Cage movie again, Lord of War. Obviously they're going to try to sell off the most valuable assets, but I suspect that they probably maintained a few batteries, that they rolled into place. And then again, they're having such issues with maintaining personnel and training. They're basically giving some of these recruits, a couple months of training and throwing them into the front. So it is possible that whoever was manning this battery that was supposedly moved to the front may have jumped the gun, so to speak. But given the nature, I'll tell you, the fact that Flight 800 was shot down today, the fact that JFK was shot down today, and I do believe that JFK was shot down. That was not an accident. That was pure Hillary Clinton trying to make sure that she didn't have an opponent to become a senator. And all these other things, there is no coincidence, there is no accidents, and they really plan these things out. As satanic as they are, it seems that everything they do is carefully timed and to coincide with specific dates and star formations and everything else.
That's very possible.
Yeah, well, I like to say, but oh my God, there's just so much going on. I mean, geez, BRICS. I mean, look at what's going on with BRICS. What is it? $100 billion they put together to create a counter IMF fund.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Actually, I think it's finally coming to light how broke the IMF is, and any country that is really seceding from the IMF and offering an alternative becomes an immediate enemy and a target of the NATO alliance, which is really a alliance of the European and now American countries that rule the global financial communities. And that's really what the root of a lot of these wars are. And it's behind, obviously behind the Libyan war, certainly behind the Syrian war. These are definitely behind the all of the sort of negative impressions that people are fed around Iran. Iran is definitely not this evil empire. They just happen to be one that was successfully, that has successfully kept its distance from the IMF since the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. So, and that, once again, another, puppet-based government that has been in place because of the Western banking infrastructure. That's what has put a lot of the people in place. I did a really interesting interview since the last show, and it was interesting to look at it in retrospect. The individuals that I interviewed against were a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and also a professor at George Washington University. And to hear those guys speak, and to think that these are the people that are basically educating our military officers and are really our first line of defense when it comes to what we'll call elite-based school training for things like foreign service and those types of places at George Washington University and the National Defense Universities. These are the kinds of individuals that back the system and push the rhetoric. And one guy had the gall to call me out as a conspiracy theorist because I was bringing up the fact that Saudi Arabia was given $75 billion worth of weapons in a deal. And then, the fact remains that, if you are involved with two people that are at war, one guy you sell a stick and the other guy you sell a gun, not only are you determining the outcome of that war, you're culpable and you're responsible for the murder of that other individual. And that is how the West is involved. It's referred to by Gerard Lewis as basically the fourth generation of war. Really, it's Sun Tzu, who's the enemy of my enemy. Mm-hmm. And so these are the things that, when you look through the sort of the smoke and mirrors of the news that we're fed, that is what's driving the global agenda for the militaries, the intelligence communities, and the financial communities that are really running our countries. And that includes Russia. Russia is just as susceptible to the influences of the oligarchs as the Americans and the British and the French, and it's not a specific us against them. These are financial communities that are held back. So when you talk about countries like BRICS, these countries are specifically held back because of their financial communities. If you take a simple look at the GDP of NATO-aligned countries, per capita, they're almost a one-to-one basis, except for countries like Norway, Qatar, and Switzerland. They're actually making more money per capita than the other countries. But if you look at the BRICS countries like Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they're significantly lower on a GDP per capita. And it's not because they don't produce as much. Russia's been very successful at actually producing comparatively. In fact, they're one of the largest manufacturers of petroleum piping infrastructure in the world. They're the third largest in the world, and they're half the size in population of the United States. So this has been a very successful economic country. It's rebounded from two devastating wars, World War I and World War II, and then also recovered several times from Western influence from a banking perspective. It wasn't the Afghan war that brought down Russia. It was the internal financial fleecing of Russia from things like Yukos Oil and guys like Khodorkovsky, who and other oligarchs that brought down Russia. They were stealing the finances, and that's what really brought it down. But we were misled, and as well as myself, that we were led to believe that it was a successful CIA war, obviously training and building up Al-Qaeda and training and building up Osama bin Laden. that actually was that brought down Russia, but it really had little to do with it. It was just a front from the military perspective. So that's when I look at these news releases about a jetliner exploding and news releases coming out about once again this week another $11 billion worth of weapons being sold to Qatar. $11 billion to Qatar. I mean, this is a country that has less than 500,000 Qataris, and the rest are all foreigners. I forget what the population is up to now.
I think it said it was like 28 million or something like that total.
Population of Qatar?
Yeah.
Oh, no way. It can't be that big. It's a tiny little place.
Right.
I don't know what it's up to now. Let me look it up real quick, but it's not that big. It's very small. I mean, the thing that people don't understand, it's only 2 million people, and only about 25% are actual locals, and it's the headquarters of basically U.S. and U.K. Middle Eastern military operations.
Yeah, it's the gas station for our fleet, right?
Well, Bahrain is the gas station, but Qatar is really the military headquarters. We have a lot of military infrastructure there. When they said they were releasing these Guantanamo prisoners to Qatar, that's like a giant, open air prison. There's more cameras in Qatar than there are in London and in Amsterdam combined. These are two of the most heavily surveilled cities in Europe. So, they've released these Guantanamo prisoners there from Afghanistan, and they're certainly not that free to roam in Qatar, and it's very hard to get in and out. So when they sell Qatar, a country of only 2 million population with really 500,000 Qataris, $11 billion worth of weapons, you can be for damn sure that weaponry is ending up in the hands of mercenaries, similar to what they've done to build up ISIS, as they're calling it now, and all the other mercenaries that have been running amok across North Africa and throughout the Middle East.
This $11 billion worth of arms is really advanced stuff that they just purchased. I think that made them the largest foreign buyer of American weapons this year.
Just this year, yeah.
Yeah, just this year. And that's kind of scary when you think of the possibility that a good portion of that is going to end up in the hands of ISIS, who already are incredibly well armed because of what they've stolen in Iraq.
Well, I said this in the show, that I believe that best case scenario for these individuals that are, like you mentioned, John McCain and these folks that are really looking to build up a all-out war between Iran and anyone that they can find to fight Iran, because they don't have Saddam Hussein as a sucker anymore. So they've put in place. They're very close with the Kurds in the north of Iraq. It's very interesting to see how close they're becoming. There's been even announcements of CIA operative bases that are very well known in northern Iraq in the what's called the Kurdish Regional Government Area. And these CIA bases have actually been very operative even prior to the Gulf Wars and between the Iran-Iraq wars, and actually prior to the Iran-Iraq wars. This is a very long history in those mountains of creating a resistance in the area to cover, smuggling, cover surveillance. There's been a lot of different. These are individuals that are, highly, knowledgeable of the region, and they're also very good for smuggling everything from heroin to weapons, as well as to any kind of interesting. Artifacts that are worth money, and that's how they funded this particular infrastructure that they're calling ISIS now, which is really just a band of mercenaries who have bounded together. Maybe maybe the actual outcome hasn't happened as if they wanted it to, but at the end of the day, they can always steer the outcome. One of the arguments during the program was that Maliki was, I was saying that Maliki was a puppet, but he wasn't the puppet that they wanted. And so now that Maliki has sort of outstayed his welcome, even as early as 2010, 2011, they wanted to get rid of Maliki, but for some reason, Biden wanted to keep him around. And this may be that reason, that they knew that he was not going to be friendly with the North, and he would be a good enemy of the North, and they could instigate a war against the Sunnis using a Shiite leader who was already very racist against Sunnis. So
yeah, I want to bring up one thing I want to get back to the Malaysian airliner. There's three big points I want to talk about regarding that, but the thing with the Kurds that's kind of interesting, or in an incestuous kind of way, is that Turkey is very anti-Kurd and has their own Kurdish issues, and has certainly been looking for an excuse to invade Iraq to eradicate Kurds. And at the same time, Turkey is one of the major supporters of ISIS, and as far as training and logistics and weapons and all that. And yet, there we have this, there's that create your own enemy type situation. Could you you see what I'm saying? I mean, with this, right. It's very confusing, to say the least.
Well, I think don't overestimate Turkey's resistance to the Kurds. There's also some very you'd call them extreme terrorists and warfare that's been going on in the region that really wasn't against the Kurdish regional government that's in place now. The majority of individuals and the majority of the Islamic people in Turkey are basically Sunnis. I think it's as high as almost 75%. So it's that's why you see the very cooperative nature between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, and obviously Turkey has been in NATO since World War II in the early 50s, and Turkey has become more and more of a very cooperative puppet for NATO, especially given the latest round of access that they've given these mercenaries to Syria and to Iraq through the same areas where you're mentioning that they may be at odds with Turkey. Well, in fact, they are not. They were always looking for some sort of sovereignty, and they were seeing that they were getting it as a part of their relationship with the CIA and Mossad and other foreign intelligence in the Kurdish regional government arena. And that is a very pro-Western, emerging country where they've talked about actually giving them their own sovereignty to length. And there's been also a lot of talk about giving them their own sort of sovereignty in the development and production of oil, which is obviously given them a huge step up on the international finance market, because as soon as you become a major oil producer and you're friendly to the West, that turns on a lot of faucets for you.
Yeah, that brings in Gaza. But before we start talking about Gaza, I want to get back to the airliner. Three issues I want to cover. One is the first one, of course, is people say follow the money. Obviously, we should be looking at who basically, went out, sold margin or bought margins against Malaysian Airlines. That's the first thing we should be looking at to see if anybody bet against them in the stock market. Well, we got a little. Scott.
Yeah, right. I just went mute for a second, trying to get my son to keep it down.
Okay, all right. The other issue, of course, is whether or not this thing was shot down by a missile or whatever. The thing was flying at 10,000 meters or 30,000 feet roughly, and came down hard. And yet, when it came down, it made this big, huge crash site with debris everywhere, bodies, bits and pieces of plane everywhere. And yet, this reminds me of the plane that allegedly went down in the field on 9/11, which left a relatively small hole and no sign of any airplane whatsoever. And yet we still have these morons out there trying to defend the big American lie, trying to say, oh, well, there's some difference because that plane came down and crashed into the ground as opposed to being shot with a missile. I mean, first of all, what's the difference between a plane crashing into the ground versus a plane that falls from 30,000 feet? I don't get it. I try to tell people airplanes don't evaporate and fires don't make buildings turn into dust. It's just yet we still have these dummies. And then the other thing is the whole Flight 370 thing, the Malaysia Air. People are saying, I hear people saying false flag. We know that there was a twin of this Malaysian airliner supposedly being hidden in Tel Aviv, and people are suggesting that this has something to do with that. Hey, I hear you talking to the kid.
Tell him to shut up. Jesus, man. Tell him twice.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I mean, my God, I've got a bird over here making, of course she's covered. She's not talking. And then if the dog starts barking, no, don't worry about it. The kid's okay. We don't hear it. But anyway, those are three issues that we have to address. I mean, clearly, the wreckage, first of all, obviously that's what a plane crash looks like, whether it was crashed into the ground all by itself like a stone or whether it was shot and lost power and crashed into the ground like a stone. It still is going to leave massive amounts of wreckage all over the place. It doesn't create a little tiny crater with no sign of any aircraft whatsoever. Kind of like the Pentagon. Planes don't crash and leave no sign of a jet. Where's all the I mean, you've seen the pictures of this crash from the Ukraine. And another issue is the Ukrainians retrieved the black boxes. And yet, where's the black boxes from Pennsylvania? Where's the black boxes from the Pentagon? I mean, do they really think we're that stupid?
Well, I mean, when you start getting into the forensics of crashed aircraft, obviously the access to those kinds of sites are heavily controlled. It's a quote-unquote crime scene, and I'm not saying that facetiously because obviously there are scenarios in which the U.S. is one to talk. Where I think it was something like around 25 years ago in the late 80s. The Americans shot down out of the U.S. I think it was the Vincennes that shot down the Iranian air flight coming out of Iran. So if you're going to make a point about shooting down a commercial airliner, let's be real here. That was a over international waters and shot down by an American. Highly advanced American ship. And then one of the scenarios that I was involved in was the shoot down of 007 over Sakhalin Island by the Russians, whereby there was no accident. There was no way that it could have been an accident. They didn't like the fact that a commercial airliner was overflying their airspace, and obviously commercial airliners. Even Russian airliners were equipped with photographic intelligence at the time. So, they were very adamant about not overflying
Now,
their airspace.
what was the name of the senator that was on board that plane that was a loose cannon? I believe there.
Yeah, there was a guy. I can't remember his name. I remember the story about there were some American politicians on board that were, needless to say, probably more outspoken than other politicians.
Right. I'm trying to remember.
I remember the story. Mm-hmm. I cannot remember the name of the guy though, right off the top.
Funny though, 007. There's that 7 again, huh?
Yeah, 007. So, but that happened in July. I think it was. It was a July shoot down, if I remember right, because it was. I think it was just after I had gotten to Offutt Air Force Base, and I knew a lot of the guys that did search and rescue on that. So, yeah, so that was an interesting. They claimed it was an RC-135, and it was flying a route, the same route that apparently they flew out of Alaska, and certainly the RC-135 never flew over Sakhalin Island. They would have definitely shot that down. But yeah,
see,
it's interesting when you start.
I'm sorry, that was during the Soviet era, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. The late 80s was before, right around, just following that was the Glasnost period, and had Gorbachev, and then obviously following the the breakup in the mid to late 90s of the former Soviet states, and then the beginning of what we call.
Well, that kind of brings me back to the thing that you mentioned earlier about the oligarchs basically fleecing Russia. Didn't the oligarchs come into power after the breakup of the Soviet Union?
Oh, absolutely. Well, they didn't come to power. They were given a lot of the Western oligarchs were given carte blanche to operate within Russia, and then guys like Bruce Rappaport, he was a Mossad financial guy, was laundering a lot of money for Russian oligarchs into Western banks in the Isle of Man, down in Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, a lot of these places where both Americans and British and Europeans, I suppose, keep their money offshore in tax havens, tax-free zones. The Russians were able to participate in that following, the glasnost sort of perestroika period. And as that was happening, a lot of these same oligarchs also became very involved in the media industries. They had media industries like, I don't know if you're familiar with, like Kommersant. It's very familiar. It's very similar to today's, let's say, Newsmax in the United States. I saw a pretty interesting article this week that was put out and pushed by another, dark knight in our military dogs of war hat tricks. This Alan West guy. Alan West was posing as another sort of savior to his flock of blind people about these guys from Lignet. I don't know if you've heard of this, the Langley Intelligence Group Network. And these guys are tied into the same sort of Likudnik, neocon, right-wing extremist Hezbollah network that is going on in Russia as well. That's what Kommersant is in Russia. So they have their own infiltration in their financial systems, and they have their own infiltration in their media infrastructure. That Putin knows what he's up against. He's very he's kind of like H.W. Bush, where he came out of the intelligence community, so he has an idea about how things work. And he put a lot of people in prison following that glasnost period. In fact, Khodorkovsky was in prison for several years and was just released this year. And sure enough, as soon as he's released, he goes down to Zurich to hang out with his buddies like Bruce Rappaport and all these other, folks at UBS and places that were laundering money for, anybody and everybody that, that wanted to hide money in banks around the world. And so now here's what we're seeing is that these are the guys that are pulling the strings to instigate overthrows in Ukraine. These are the guys that are pulling the strings to fund and ship military equipment and finance have governments finance these uprisings in places like Libya and supposedly these are not and serious. These are not uprisings that are happening by chance. They called it an Arab Spring. I think what Arab Spring in Egypt was, it was hey, look what we can do with this social networking. We're living in an age of enlightenment that has never happened on the planet. We can communicate more effectively, and we can share information more effectively than ever before on the history of the planet. But yet, think about how advanced the technology is and how little of it is being used. Most people are using their smartphones for games, for entertainment, for these types of things,
or listening to our show. Half our listeners are using smartphones.
Well, that's great. I got to tell you now, if they're listening to programs like this, they are not the majority, but they are the growing enlightened organization. And that's what I'm saying is that nowhere in time did individuals like yourself and myself and other guests that you bring on your shows have the opportunity to reach such a broad audience. And these audiences are growing exponentially And what's happening is that, as things grow and they become useful to a resistance or a knowledgeable group that can, understand these kinds of things that we're discussing and not say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory, which is not. These are not conspiracy theories. These are actual facts of things that are going on that we're trying to expose. Right. And so when these people do become, let's say a force to deal with, they become co-opted and they send in, individuals who co-opt those organizations. The same guys that are sending in individuals to co-opt, let's say, for example, the resistance against Yugoslavia, one of the first ones with Optor and Canvas. There were two resistance that were pushed with the youth in Yugoslavia prior to, and actually during the Serbian war, the Serbo-Croatian war over there.
This would have been after Tito died.
Yes, of course. Yes, yeah. This was against Milosevic, and it was all pushed by the same guys that are pushing the. They're the ones that did the Rose Revolution. They're the ones that did the Orange Revolution. This is the left wing American, sort of the neoliberals. And the George Soroses. So, when you see the left wing, they're always going against the Koch brothers. But they never speak out against the Soroses. And, there's like a very popular left wing, I guess what we'll call a news media, person is, this girl, Abby Martin. Abby Martin is very much in line with the Institute for Peace Studies, the IPS guys, which is a complete Soros game, and Glenn Greenwald plays along those same lines. So I'm very suspicious of, Abby Martin, God bless her, she puts out some very controversial and some very, it's extremely good reporting, but there is she'll take you to the river, but she won't let you drink the water. There's only so far she's willing to go. She does speak out against Obama, don't get me wrong, but there is a left-wing tilt to a lot of these organizations. The Veterans for Peace organization that I belong to is the same way. They were very much about impeaching Bush during the Bush era because it's a very left-leaning organization. But as soon as Obama basically came into power, that whole anti-war movement wasn't as it kind of fizzled away because everybody thought Obama wasn't going to be as war-bound, and he became probably worse, if not as bad, certainly as bad. But the left-leaning organizations are very forgiving to Obama, and some people do speak out, but those people are still very left-leaning in their political alliances, and you don't know. A lot of it has to do with their family history. I use this crazy woman Liz Wall as an example. Here's I guess a Filipino-Hungarian descent. Whose family barely survived the occupation of Hungary post-World War II, and then were able to escape. So when she's on the air, quitting on air, obviously she had a bone to pick with Russia, because her ancestry had a horrible experience with the occupation post-World War II. So those kinds of binds that tie, those historical family binds, are often the ones that drive our opinions about geopolitical relationships, when in fact those relationships are superseded by those oligarchs and those sort of folks that are controlling the finances and the media on a different level. So that's really important to understand. And as soon as you can say, toss aside what you've learned, unfortunately I was raised on the Encyclopedia Britannica, and we didn't have World Book, exactly, same things. And if you look at the history of those particular publications, Encyclopedia Britannica is a great example. That publication at the time in the early 1900s when it came out was the most printed book in the history of mankind at the time, because you had to take a look at the development of the printing technologies. Once typeset printing came out in the 1800s, that was the first time they were able to put out mass media. And prior to the 1850s, less than 30 to 40% of the entire United States population could even read. So, you had a 50-year span, and then this giant volume of books comes out that becomes the status quo for, quote unquote, history. And lo and behold, it was, authored and printed and put together in Cambridge University in England. So we were raised on a very, biased view of the world.
Yeah, I've got to give you my World Book story from the 70s, but before I do that, I want to thank Rhonda for pointing out that it was Lawrence McDonald, representative from Georgia, that was on that flight 007, and I'm trying to remember what it was that he did, but it seemed to me that he was kind of closely related to the LaRouche organization.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So he was kind of considered a right-winger. But my experience with the World Book Encyclopedia when I was growing up, do you remember how back during the time of the Glomar Explorer, how they were talking about manganese nodules on the ocean floor and how they were going to suck these things up with big vacuums and it was going to provide all these wealth and riches? And I remember, that was prominently featured in the World Book Encyclopedia, and yet we find out that that was nothing more than a CIA disinformation campaign to cover their salvaging of a Russian submarine with nuclear missiles on board. I mean, look at I mean, they basically lied to generations of students that were depending on this stupid encyclopedia for information to provide cover for this operation, which is still extremely top secret.
Absolutely.
They still get really excited about this whole Glomar Explorer business with Howard Hughes.
That's a great point. I mean, what's interesting, I'm glad you said that because it made me sort of be retrospective on a lot of the guys that I worked with. They still believe a lot of those types of stories, and have not been enlightened and are not interested in looking outside it. These are individuals that, they believe that might is right, and right or wrong, my country, I'm making a difference because I'm on the right side of history, and I don't care about these facts that I was fooled as a child, and don't tell me about that stuff because that doesn't even matter,
Okay.
So
I got to throw something in there. All right, Rhonda, just remind me, McDonald was heavily involved. He was the chairman of the John Birch Society.
Ah, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, leading anti-communist in the American government at the time. So, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Rhonda.
I think it was rumored that he was related to Patton too. There was one point that I'd heard that he was one of the guys that was behind investigating Patton's murder. That was one of the things I remembered about it. Now that you say something.
Yeah, I remember that he was heavily involved in some sort of research or some sort of investigation, and that he was getting ready to divulge something. So clearly, there was some big reason for them to take him out.
Yeah, he definitely had some interesting background. He was he had a lot of access to very interesting people. He was a very well, groomed individual, kind of like all the other individuals.
Mm-hmm. Listen, we're down to about 8 minutes or so before the break, and of course you can tell it's a good show when the time just disappears. My God, it went fast, huh? That was a quick hour. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about. We got to get into Gaza. We got to talk about what's going on in Gaza. The Ukraine, obviously, that's not going away. The airliner was supposedly probably, people think it's a false flag or a distraction. Clearly, it's a distraction. I mean, it seems like at this point, with these things go on, it's not, it's hard to call anything a distraction because that would be like saying that we have to focus on one geographical area at one time when these things are happening all over the world. But what do you think we need to talk about the most right now?
That's a good question. I mean, you're seeing a lot of pistons firing right now. It almost is it appears as though there's a build up to basically we have an election next year, and obviously, between now and next year, if you can just get somebody, to do something, in the United States to create hysteria again, there'll be no shortage of people that are willing to fillet the current sort of agendas or individuals that are pushing the agendas that are getting us in trouble. Mm-hmm. So I think that we're being kind of set up. There's so much going on. They're talking about how ISIS is going to attack the United States. That's here we go again.
Yeah, and there's the border. The nonsense with the border. We're finding Muslim prayer rugs at the border. We're finding Urdu to English translation dictionaries on the border. As if we've got the M13 gang coming in out of El Salvador and what have you. And this is being portrayed as a humanitarian mission. Then, of course, we've got the UN threatening to intervene as if this is some sort of a crisis involving refugees. So clearly this is it seems like Obama is bending over backwards to destroy this country from the inside, and obviously as humans we have to be compassionate for these children, but clearly these, it's like save the children. It's kind of like Sandy Hook, which is also another big farce. They've they know how to jerk our heartstrings, so to speak.
Well, it's definitely a move. I wouldn't give Obama credit for all this. It's a move by the left wing. The left wing has always in the country been very successful at taking minorities and also at taking what is really the poverty class. It's very easy to see that the folks in the South obviously are not as proponents of the left-wing infrastructure, but there are such a large number of states that dominate the electoral college that it overrides the southern states, and the movement of the political infrastructure is very well understood, by people that have been playing politics in this country, for generations. So what the left wing has been very instrumental at doing that, and obviously the right wing has lost a lot of ground as of recent. So the move by the left to placate the and grow the Hispanic voting bloc will almost guarantee future control. And so you're seeing a movement in the political infrastructure of the country whereby there'll be a more dominant play for the Democratic Party, obviously in the Hispanic communities, because of the especially if they give them their status and give them the opportunity to vote. Right now, you see very few minorities voting for the Republican Party, and they make up somewhere about I'm going to say close to 30% of the population in the United States. I think it's like 13% is African American, and about 16 or 17% are Hispanic. So that's a huge voting bloc to depend on. And,
well, I got to say, Scott, just for anybody that's listening, I was married to a Hispanic woman for 20-something years, so clearly I am not prejudiced against the Mexicans. I love me my Mexican.
No. It has nothing to do with. It has nothing to do with that. It has more to do. So I liken it to the sort of the left and right wing parties. I use Greece as an example because I know a lot about their politics. Greece does the same thing. They basically put together a left wing, and they make sure that the left wing takes care of all the poverty-stricken folks. So they make sure all the social programs are really well funded, and they go out of their way to please the sort of the agricultural base of the country. And they've held power under a Western puppet, Papandreou family, for 3 generations. So, and that was a United Kingdom oligarch puppet that they'd put in place following World War II. So those are the same things that have happened in the United States. Our left-wing puppets have been put in place by these oligarchs that say, okay, go ahead and appease the peasant class, whereby, the poor white and poor, Hispanic and African American populations, and you'll get a pretty decent voting block, and on top of that, we'll take care of you guys. But
African American, you look at the African American population now; they're really turning on Obama en masse. They feel like they've been sold out. Hey, listen, we're going to be taking a break here real quick.
A lot of them call Obama a blackneck. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we come back, I want to talk about this balkanization of California. I don't know if you've heard about there's talks that they're trying to pass a measure to break up California into several smaller states, which is kind of crazy to me because obviously California is a very powerful entity in the United States. If anybody wants to call in, and when we come back from break, we will open the phone lines. Obviously, I want to focus on Scott here, but if you're interested in joining us, you can call in at 347-688-2902 or use the Skype Freedom screen. Okay, so when we come back from the break, the phone lines will be open if you want to ask Scott some questions and hopefully no diatribes. But okay, there's our break. All right, everybody, Scott, mute for me, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. You guys just hang in there. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. The finder of lost children and missing persons. Monique Lassan. Surveillance, civil and criminal investigations. I investigate.
No, I am the chosen one.
Do not underestimate the power of good, and do not dismiss the strength of the child. Yes, every Wednesday evening on Revolution Radio, come join our very own I Investigatrix, Monique Lassan, with her private Eye X-Files.
So you're the finder of lost children?
Private Eye X-Files, every Wednesday from 10 to midnight Eastern, Studio B, on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
I realize it's very hard for you to take in. But is your destiny to find the golden child?
Listen in to Journeys with JP, Tuesdays on Revolution Radio at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, with a variety of guests, each giving their unique perspective on their journey through to the now. Journeys offers you, the listener, a chance to share that perspective. Join me, JP, on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio, simulcast with Wolf Spirit Radio.
Every Tuesday evening on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, we present our goddess spiritual warrior, Kathy Bilski.
I command. I call to the architect of the universe's divine creators and ask for permission to quantum leave the world in all life forms on all planes and dimensions, seen and unseen, connected with planet Earth, to let us go beyond our known potential into the greatest unknown golden age the universes and worlds and all planets have ever experienced.
Kathy teaches the spiritual truth so that you may create a better life and be able to make positive changes for yourself and for the planet. She helps us remember that we are not powerless, but very creative spiritual beings having an Earth experience. Time to quantum leap into the age of divine enlightenment and let Kathy provide you with the tools of knowledge you need to awaken spiritually. That's the Quantum Leap Show. Let light unite every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio, Studio B.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
Your body's filled with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio! Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay. All right. Welcome back to the Stephen D. Kelley Show. We're having a good time here. First hour went really fast. If you were just tuning in, you hadn't missed the first hour, you're going to have to listen to it on the YouTube. In about 24 hours, it should be up on YouTube, hopefully. My guest tonight is Scott Rickard. This is his second visit with us. Scott, again, is former NSA linguist and intelligence analyst. We're getting a little bit of feedback there from you, Scott. Anyway.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Wow. What a show. We're covering a lot of information. If you guys would like to join us, those of you that are listening, anybody in chat, whatever, please give us a call right now at 347-688-2902 or Skype in at Freedom Screen. I want to remind everybody that we are listener supported, completely 100% listener supported. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please consider donating anything that you can afford. Even $5, $1, it doesn't matter. If I look at my, let me just look real quick and see how we're doing on the old budget here. Well, it looks like we've got 14 days left to make about $800 or so. So that's not bad. We're doing pretty good, but we can do better than that. If I want to remind you guys that join our chat room if you have not done it. Join our Facebook page if you have not done that. And most important thing that you can do is tell your friends about this network. Tell them that they're really missing out if they don't tune in. And I know that, a lot of you guys, since I've been here in roughly a year or so, I have seen our listenership increase at least 50 times. So it's like Scott was saying earlier, our message, our this alternative media, and the number of people that are listening to alternative media is growing exponentially. And we owe it all to you, and we hope that you will help us to spread the truth and spread that fire until it just burns everything up and there is nothing left but the truth. So anyway, that's it. All right, Scott. I think last thing we were talking about was the illegal alien issue, and of course the dangers that are possibly going to be presented with weapons and smuggling, and the involvement of the UN in trying to remove our guns and trying to take away our sovereignty, and just any excuse they can come up with to try to pass martial law. But there's one thing, though, I should say about this whole martial law issue, and somebody brought this up regarding the Ukraine, and obviously this is a bankers cabal issue. But apparently, during martial law, people are not required to make payments on their mortgages. So the only reason they have not officially declared martial law in these war zones, and certainly here, is because the bankers wouldn't like it. What do you think about that?
No doubt about that. I mean, you're living in the country of the kingpins of the bankers fleecing of homes and businesses and so on and so forth. We have the largest foreclosure rate in the history of the world. There are an amazing number of individuals who have lost their homes and their wealth over the past 5 years, while at the same time the government has racked up over, I'd say, probably $5 trillion through TARP and quantitative easing programs that have kept the fat cats even fatter and have really fleeced the property. I live in a county where there's still more properties foreclosing than there are for sale, and they say that the market is coming back, which is really a sad state of affairs of. And then there have been announcements from the Banking of International Settlements and other folks that are coming out saying that, we're about ready to hit another 2008 cliff on the financial fall because of the fact that there really never was a correction. All they did is they put a lot of money in place to artificially keep the interest rates down. And the reason they did that is because the U.S. government debt that they're paying to the Federal Reserve oligarchs is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500 billion a year. And if they raised that's just the interest, and if they raised the actual interest rate to where it should be, that number would easily fly to over $1 trillion a year in interest. So they're artificially keeping it low by pumping in these actual
sorry for distracting you.
Sorry about that. You distracted me.
I know I distracted you.
I'm sorry. You typed something. I tried to read it, but they're artificially keeping it low because of the fact that they're trying to make the U.S. government's interest rates payments low, but at the same time, they don't show up, and so they can say, "Look, see, we didn't have a deficit," because they're not counting the TARP and these other quantitative easing programs as a actual deficit against the budget, because it's outside the budget. They're operating, and they're just basically increasing national debt on an annualized basis, and they're talking about it as raising the debt ceiling. I get used to hearing that. Every year we're going to hear that. And when another country does it, they're going to call those guys a failed state because they can't make their debt. So that's the difference between being the country that controls the finances versus being the country that is at the whim of the countries that do control the finances.
Okay, somebody in chat has asked if about the rumors of George Bush Sr. dying last night. Do you think he's dead? Do you think they're going to pull a Nelson Mandela on us, or what?
Well, we could only be so lucky. If he had passed away, I'm sure they would make a big fanfare about it. There's no reason to hide that. But that would be, the beginning of hopefully about 100 other deaths of individuals who belonged in prison alongside Obama.
Okay, well let's not go there, because I try real hard to, like, especially on Facebook, to not do anything that's going to cause the Secret Service to come visit me. But
I'm not calling for anyone to go kill them. I hope that they all naturally die.
Okay, well even then, bad karma. We don't want to wish death on anybody, but we certainly want.
I'd love to wish some death on that guy. I apologize. I'm certain that he has raised a very illegitimate daughter when it comes to the truth. So,
well, the thing is, though, that's kind of interesting, and you got to kind of wonder what the thinking that goes on with these situations. But clearly we're hearing now that Nelson Mandela died many months prior to the actual announcement and the funeral. And it's almost like they try to use it as cover. Perhaps they're doing such a thing with the Bush, Senior, that they want to wait for the opportunity, the right moment to divulge information, so that they could either distract us or they could have the funeral coincide with some other major event that they need to get world leaders together for. Kind of like they said that when Mandela died, that the big rumor was that there was a Anunnaki king that was visiting the planet, and that all these world leaders went to Africa to go pay homage to this character. Did you hear that story?
I did not, but I did see the story of Obama's wife getting ticked off because he was doing selfies with the Dutch,
Danish,
the Danish president. Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Yeah,
hey, I got a good one, Scott. I got to bring this up. All right, everybody that's listening right now, I want you to hold your hand up, and I want you to put your fingers straight out and look at your hands. Every man should have an index finger that is shorter than their ring finger, and every woman should have an index finger that is longer than their ring finger. Everybody look at your hand and verify that is true right now. And the reason why I'm saying that is because Michelle Obama's index finger is longer than her ring finger, which would suggest that she is not a female. So if every one of our listeners would look at their hands right now and verify what I just said, if you are a female, your index finger should be longer than your ring finger. And if there is any person out there, male or female, that does not have that, I would love them to call in and tell me right now, because I believe that biologically that is a constant. And if you look at any photos of Michelle Obama, you will see that her ring finger is shorter than her index finger. So
sounds like you've been drinking with Joan Rivers lately.
Yeah, good old Joan Rivers. Well, hey, Joan Rivers, at her age, she doesn't care what she says, right? What is she, 80?
I don't think that has anything to do with age.
Yeah, okay, whatever. But she came out with a comment.
A crass, ugly human being. So.
Yeah, well, either way, from a genetic standpoint, though, I would suggest that, millions of people that are out there that may be listening right now, look at your hand and see if that's not true. And then now go back and look at pictures of Michelle Obama. It's clear that she has the hands of a man. Okay, everybody's quiet because they're looking at their hands right now. Yeah, she's transgender. Now, I don't have anything against transgender, and I don't have anything against homosexuals. I mean, that's certainly a personal choice, and I'm certainly not trying to condemn anybody. But my God, talk about. Obviously, it's come out now that without a doubt that Obama was not born in the United States or Hawaii or otherwise. He clearly was born in Kenya. So, is there no end to the lies and deceit that's involved with this administration? It's pretty crazy.
Well, I think it's funny these things are really so unimportant, whether he was born in Hawaii or not, to be honest with you, the guy's mom was definitely involved, Russian linguist, living in Indonesia at the time that we're overthrowing the government, that's enough right there, I don't need any more information. And then,
right.
Obama's wife, for God's sakes, I really don't care whether, he's got a couple of daughters, they had to come from somewhere.
It could have been adopted.
Yeah, it could have been adopted, but it's such an insignificant thing, whereby this guy is by far one of the most well-placed puppets when it comes to the Democratic Party. He was grew up in the sort of the CIA crosshairs, and then obviously skated through college, and then ended up working for the left-wing mafia that runs Chicago, and they propped him up and turned him into a senator, and lo and behold, he became president. So, and those are all factual things, and that's enough for me. I really don't care if his wife is an alien. To be honest with you, that wouldn't bother me a bit. I've already got enough information that I don't like. So.
Yeah, well, I guess his pedigree really isn't all that important, but I hear now that the Daily Mail has been reporting that the CIA did DNA tests, and they found out that Obama was not related to his grandparents that supposedly raised him. I guess Ann Dunham or Stanley Ann's parents apparently are not related to Obama.
Well, I mean, it's entirely possible, when you've got babies, and the babies don't know who their parents were. There's a lot of that kind of thing going on. Look at the Ottoman Empire. They used to take children from their captors, whoever they conquered, and then take them back and turn them into these like incredibly elite sort of guards, they compare them to some type of like Marine Corps.
Kind of like the Sherpas, or not the Sherpas, but the Nepalese. What is it? The soldiers from Nepal, or what do they call them?
Yeah. I don't know exactly what you call them, but I know exactly what you're talking about. But that's what I'm getting to, is that they take
Gurgers or something like that.
They take them and they turn them into these incredibly advanced war machines, and then they send them back to their host countries to be the guards of their ancestors, and they know nothing else other than the fact that they're they are so brainwashed that that's all that they can do, and that's very easy to do with young people, and especially young people in these countries that have suffered, but certainly in advanced societies where you want to groom individuals for positions. Access has a lot more to do than capability, and so that's.
Yeah, the Romans were big on that. I think it was the Salatians that they chose to they sent to the Britannia to fight for them.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but that's there's a lot of that type of work that's done where they choose a colony, or they choose an area in which to either train these elite guards, or the Corsicans, for France is a pretty common example of something like that. And these are very and obviously the Corsicans were involved in the drug trade. The French Connection all went through there, and that's that's a whole other story around the heroin trade through Canada and the United States, and these whole groups of individuals that have been involved in the alcohol and drug and prostitution, and that whole sort of underground. That's a huge player in the oligarch industry. The same guy I mentioned earlier in the program tonight, Semyon Mogilevich. He's totally tied into the oil and gas business in Russia and Ukraine. You don't get involved in that business without having to pay a tax to his his security forces that make sure there's no problems on the pipeline. So.
Oh my gosh, the chat's going nuts over my Obama claims here, my Michelle Obama claims.
Yeah, I try to stay away from that kind of stuff. It's just, it's just too inflammatory. I was telling a guy today, these are guys that, Veterans for Peace guys and USS Liberty guys that I talk with a lot, and the stuff that comes up, obviously around 9/11, a lot of people shy away from it because it's become, sort of that stigmata type thing, whereby if you do question the official story, they automatically can categorize you as, okay, here's another whack job, because they've been so instrumental at basically shutting it down. And the same people that I mentioned earlier, these sort of left-wing individuals who were very, 9/11 was an inside job type people until you had Obama come on board, and then kind of, well, let's just talk about the future now. Let's not focus on the fact that it might have been an inside job. And so a lot of the folks that were really on board with the anti-war movement and were very suspicious of this whole 9/11 sort of cover up. There are a lot of things that were covered up. And actually purposely and deliberately excluded from the 9/11 Commission report that should have been investigated. And those are the types of things, when you start talking about those types of things, it's easy for these sort of hijacked activist movements to sort of label, oh, that's just one of those 9/11 truthers. Those guys have really gone off the edge. But a lot of those guys were participants in it, up until 2011. Yeah. And they've all kind of fallen by the wayside, and they've joined these organizations that, they do have good initiatives, but they're forgetting the facts that there were a lot of unanswered questions, not just in the 9/11 incident, but, things like USS Liberty. And a lot of the Liberty guys are very suspicious of the 9/11 incident.
What a wonderful segue! What a wonderful segue, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. But they don't talk about it a lot, and the reason they don't talk about the 9/11 issue, because they want people to actually believe their story on the USS Liberty, and so they realize that if they talk about 9/11, they'll get a sort of be outcasted as these quote unquote conspiracy theorists. So they say, look, I don't want to talk about the 9/11 thing just because I want to focus on the one thing that has affected my life. And we're talking about something that happened it happened in 1967, so 47 years ago in June of this year. And coming up on, and these, a lot of these guys were in their 20s, so they're all in their late they're all in their late 60s and early 70s, and one by one the older guys are passing away, and all of them were told to keep their mouth shut, and most of them didn't start talking until the 80s. So they, most of them actually did keep their mouth shut for 20 years.
Were you able to round any of them up for me?
I did talk to a couple of them. I'm going to meet with some of them up in Asheville, North Carolina. There's a Veterans for Peace annual event up there. I'm going to go up there and see how much more co-opted that organization is by these left-wing folks. With an interesting email I got this week from Georgetown University. I had participated in a conference at the Berkeley School of Law and the Freedom of Religion, I think it was. It was a conference of all lawyers, religious lawyers. Now these are global professors that have doctorates in law that talk about and teach about the freedom of religion, and they meet annually at this Berkeley School of Law conference in Georgetown University, and it's very interesting. It's I asked a very simple question, and the question was around whether or not they felt as though the Scofield Reference Bible had any influence on the Christian communities on supporting the Zionist political agenda of the late 1800s and early 1900s. And it was very surprising that one of the doctorate priests that was there confirmed it, in front of a crowd, and you could see all of these jaws hitting the floor. Because and a lot of people came up to me and asked me, about the question following the break following. So the email that went to Veterans for Peace this week said, "Hey, we're going to quote this guy in a transcript from a conference from 2 years ago, and we want to make sure that it's okay with Veterans for Peace," because he said he was with Veterans for Peace at the time, because I was a member of the organization then too. And that's the only organization I belong to other than the Republican Party, but I'm more of a pirate and Republican clothes, to be honest with you.
Oh, so gosh.
I apologize, but the only reason I joined the Republican Party is because they basically run my district, and if you want to know how the snakes live, you got to go into the snake pit and. No,
I don't begrudge you that at all. I mean, I was a Reagan Republican for years. I voted for Bush Senior, but gosh, and I hated Clinton. I supported Bush, and then after Clinton, when Bush Jr. came along, I realized, wow, these guys are both scum. So I kind of all that went away.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that they were wanting to quote me, so they sent the emails out to the communications directors of Veterans for Peace. And so, I don't know these individuals. I'm not as active in the group as I probably should be. But what was interesting is I looked up some of their bios and I looked at their backgrounds, and lo and behold, they're part of that whole Soros left-wing, pro-Israel Zionist type of group. And I was like, there you go. The guys running the communications at Veterans for Peace. They've basically hijacked that organization as well.
Yep.
So
they all are. Even the NRA's been hijacked. What people don't understand, but Charlton Heston, their big figurehead for so long, was very anti-gun.
Yeah.
So was John Wayne. All of them were. So, yeah, clearly, yeah. But anyway.
It's funny. I also thought about something else during this conversation. The Bush, H.W. Bush's inauguration. I was working at an NSA at the time, and it was very interesting. Unlike the recent inaugurations of the King of the United States, Obama. You could actually get pretty close to H.W. Bush when he was being inaugurated without having to have won a Willy Wonka golden ticket. There were no barricades. There were no, I guess you have to go through metal detectors now. I didn't even get there early. I came in by metro because I didn't want to deal with traffic. And when I got there, I walked up to the reflection pond right in front of the Capitol Hill there, where they do the inauguration. So I was able to walk up and get very close without having to wake up at 0:30 and go and camp out. And so very few people showed up for the head of the CIA to become the president, and it was close enough where, obviously this guy could have easily been threatened at the time comparatively to, what you can get away with today. And it was not a huge crowd. And we all looked at him and go, boy, this is going to get ugly. This guy knows where all the bodies are buried.
Yeah. Well, look at Obama. When he was elected the first time around, he went to Europe and they welcomed him as a messiah. Now he goes to Europe. He barely draws a crowd, and he's standing behind a 6-inch glass. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, he says something that's supposed to be cheered, and then people are like, okay, next.
Yeah, it's either dead silence or boos. Yeah. But what really gives it away is that bulletproof glass he's got to stand behind now.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, they really had a good puppet, and he wouldn't have lasted, 2 administrations, if they hadn't, put up such a bozo against him. They had a lot of other better options. To actually beat Obama. In fact, the one guy that I think would have beaten Obama for the Republican Party, not that I liked him, Herman Cain he's a low down bastard. He's horrible.
Well, yeah, but we all know that the election was stolen from Ron Paul. I mean, the Republicans shot themselves. They cut their foot off with Ron Paul.
It's not cut their foot off; they amputated it on purpose. They are like, okay, we don't want that because we can't control that. Interesting story about that. Rick Santorum. They didn't want Santorum either. The Santorum, here's an interesting inside story. This is the kind of stuff that you get, when you're a delegate for the Republican Party. You get to see the belly of the beast. And I'm by far not an advocate of the Republican Party. I'm only a member so that I can see, how it operates. And so, and I've always been independent. And the only reason I joined it is because I got sick and tired of things going on without understanding them. And what I found is that you had, during that election, Rick Santorum did win a primary. He won the first one. And he won it very strategically because of two particular individuals, because of Mike Huckabee and because of Forrest Freeze. Now, Forrest Freeze is very good friends with Dick Cheney, and Mike Huckabee, he could basically, I think that he would definitely be the first guy to sleep with Netanyahu if that was what it took to get what he wanted. And this guy he's been to Israel 25, 30 times. He is extreme Zionist. He's an extreme pro-Israel guy, and he's out of his mind. I mean, his daughter was the campaign manager for Santorum in Iowa. His daughter had been basically working Iowa, and he donated $1 million to a group called the Family Leader about 2 months before the holidays, around the beginning of end of October and beginning of November. So throughout all the holidays, at the pulpits of all the Pentecostal churches that the Family Leader represents, which, by the way, the Pentecostal churches, either the third or fourth largest church in the country, but the largest church in Iowa. And so anytime you see these Assemblies of God type churches, those are the very strong wing of the Zionist Christian sort of sheep. So this group got $1 million. So every priest and reverend is standing on his pulpit on Sunday, talking about Santorum and what great values he has. And
okay, Scott, I got to stop you because every time you say Santorum, I'm reminded of.
I hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, all right. Let's just point out real quick for the listeners that Santorum is the only presidential candidate ever who had an official policy on anal sex.
Yeah, and then his name was affiliated with some frothy substance.
Yeah, the frothy residue from anal sex. I can't hear the word Santorum without thinking about that now. It's
well, thankfully there's something good that came out of that election. So the interesting part is then Forrest Freeze kicked in about $600,000 into elections, into the actual television advertisement. So here's a guy who had raised very little money to date, but on this first primary he put $1.6 million into a very small state. I mean, you have to put things into perspective where you go, comparing Iowa, to I guess like Florida, for example. The population in Iowa is I think it's like 3 million. It's probably just over 3 million, where Florida, the population is almost 20 million. So it's, let's say, 7 times the size. Well, spending $600,000 on television ads in Iowa is not just 7 times as expensive as in Florida, because Florida is a much more expensive market when it comes to television ads. You're talking about, if you spent $600,000 in Iowa on television ads, it would be the equivalent of spending between $5 and $10 million in the state of Florida. And Ron Paul didn't even raise $10 million. So let's put these in perspective. That's why he won that first one, because his daughter had been campaigning there. Mike Huckabee had placed that $1 million. Forrest Freeze had placed that $600,000. And when he won, the Republican Party said, "Hey, what was that? We don't want Santorum," and he never won a primary after that. They made sure that he did not win a primary after that. And so that's with the control of the oligarchs and the finances. And so when it came to Florida, I was actually voting in the straw poll in Florida when they had, Rick Perry had stuck his foot and his leg in his mouth during the Fox News debates. And they were basically betting each other money, about things. Him and Romney were betting each other. And at that point, they had all funneled money into Rick Perry. It was very odd. The whole sea of Republican Party, 3,000 people that were voting in the straw poll, were all wearing red and blue Rick Perry colors on Thursday. And Thursday night, they had this particular debate, and Rick Perry just fell on his face. So there were robocalls and people getting called and all the delegates getting called across the state of Florida, whereby on Friday we were all told basically we're going to go with Herman Cain. Herman Cain's our guy. So on Saturday morning, when everybody shows up for the vote on the straw poll, you've got oddly enough, Ron Paul doesn't even show up, and I have a theory on that that's kind of odd. But you also had all the entire crowd. Now you see a sea of white and blue. And the sea of white and blue were all Herman Cain supporters. And Herman Cain won by a landslide. And that's the only thing he won, but he won by a landslide the straw poll. And typically 9 times out of 10, you win the Florida straw poll, you get the Republican Party candidacy. So, and the only thing that stopped him from moving forward is that he got caught with his pen in the company ink with that young lady that he was texting at 4 o'clock in the morning and flying out to Palm Springs, because there was actually, and that's what killed Herman Cain, and he would have actually probably had a great chance at beating Obama, and that's why he was chosen by guys like Bill Diamond. And now Bill Diamond, you might not have heard his name. This is a guy that every American should know. Everybody knows about Adelson, but they don't know who Adelson gives his money to. That's Bill Diamond. He gives it to Bill Diamond, and Bill Diamond manages it for him.
So that's Adelson's hatchet man?
Adelson's hatchet man is somebody to contend with. If you look
we should mention real quick, for those that don't know, Adelson would be the owner of the Sands Corp, who is what we would call a Jewish casino oligarch.
We call that the Red Mafia, if you really want to call it something. So okay. These are the Meyer Lansky proteges. So, and the Bronfman proteges. So, and these are the guys that are basically architecting the elections in our country. So take a quick look at Bill Diamond if you ever get a chance. I've got, on my webpage, I've got a note that I've written about him, and it's all factual. And I'm probably, the only reason I found out about that was because I went to this, straw poll. And after the straw poll, I couldn't believe how it almost looked like the Kremlin. Everybody was going for Herman Cain overnight, and Ron Paul actually came in third again. But what was interesting is that I put on some Herman Cain buttons and stickers, and I decided I'd go to the after parties and talk about how great it was that Herman Cain won now, just to see what the hell happened. And so I'm going into the Peabody Hotel. It's right next door to the convention center where they held it. And I could see everybody walking up and, not literally kissing this guy's ring, but everybody was showing this guy great respect. And this guy was, he was with guys like, I don't know if you're familiar with Lee Atwater's son. He's down here as a congressman in Florida. But these guys are basically very involved in the Republican Party. And, obviously, Atwater was the campaign manager for Reagan. And so this goes way back, and his son is very powerful in the Republican Party in Florida, out of Palm Beach of all places. And this is where Bill Diamond operates, out of Palm Beach. Bill Diamond, he used to be the commissioner of New York under Giuliani. He was the guy that put Giuliani in the mayor's seat in New York. He was also the guy who spent $70 million upgrading World Trade Center 7 as the headquarters for the New York Police Department. So this guy knows where all the bodies are buried. So when I walked up to him, I didn't know who Bill Diamond was. But I knew he was very important because the guys that he was shaking hands with, I knew who they were in the Republican Party. So I went up to him and I said, hey, this is fantastic. I can't believe it. Finally, the Republican Party's done something great and gotten a guy that can finally beat Obama. I'm so happy. And I said, I don't know how that happened. I said at my synagogue in Brevard County, our entire synagogue went with him because the Republican Party in the state of Florida, 8 of the largest districts or 8 of the largest executive committees hold their meetings at synagogues. So
you're such a double agent, I swear.
So I go up to him. I said, at our synagogue, we all decided to do Herman Cain, and so, lo and behold, the whole state. I don't know who came up with that decision. It's the best thing that happened to the Republican Party. I said, and he says, well, shake the hand of the man that made that decision. And I said, sir, I don't know who you are, but thank you so much. And then he walked me into Lee Atwater's ice cream soda party and introduced me to everybody in that party. Or not Lee Atwater, his son. So what was very interesting is that it kind of showed me, okay, here's where the belly of the beast is. And then I started to attend some of their executive committees and get some back stories on some different guys in the Republican Party in Florida. And now I really understand, Florida Republican Party politics. And before that, if I hadn't joined the Republican Party, I'd be just like the other fools out there that read the paper and believe what they saw.
Scott, I just got to say to the listeners right now, I really hope you guys are listening to what Scott is suggesting here, because this is how a guerrilla operates. You don't let them know what you're thinking. You work from the inside.
That's right. You go with the flow. You say what you want to say. And you make sure that they hear what you want to hear. It's just like taking a lie detector test. You can pass any lie detector test. You tell them what they want to hear, and in your mind you say the exact opposite. I've always passed my lie detector tests, and I've lied my ass off when I'm taking them. So it's the same thing with these guys. These guys, if you go with the flow and you act like you're part of it, and you act like you know what's going on, they will show you what's actually happening, and they'll be proud of it. They're proud of it. So. And it's very I'm sure the Democratic Party is just as bad. I haven't joined that piece of crap yet, but I guarantee that they've got their same problems. I can see it through the Soros gang as well. So it's now that I've gotten that kind of information, I put it out there. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party here that go, Jesus, what that guy said was right. So there are there's a few, not many. There's 200 people in the executive committee. That run the district that I live in, that basically manages about 1 million people in the state of Florida. It controls 1/30 of the delegate votes in the state of Florida. So we have 100 delegates out of about 3,000. So that's sort of the nature of politics. If Plato said, I might have said this on your last show, but it's very important. Plato said the punishment for individuals that don't get involved in public affairs is to be ruled by evil men, and we are ruled by evil men.
That's right. Yeah, if you don't get involved in politics, you're going to be ruled by lesser people. That's for sure. Anyway, wow. Hey, listen, it looks like we're down to about 15 minutes here, or even possibly less. If you guys listening want to join us, your chance to do it is running out. This is something you want to get involved in. Come in and say hello to Scott, and say what you want to say. 347-688. 2902. Anyway, I'm having a good time. It was show went quick tonight, Scott. Gosh.
Yeah, well, we didn't get into Gaza yet. Unfortunately, that's probably the worst thing that's going on for those individuals that are suffering.
Well, let's talk about that. The ground offensive has started. I think Israel has had. Okay, I'll make a point here real fast. Israel doesn't screw around. Their defense industries are state-of-the-art. One Israeli bomb, one 500-pound bomb dropped from a F-16 or one of their 105-millimeter shells is probably equal to the explosive power of the entire arsenal of the Hamas rockets that were smuggled in under these caves from wherever, from the Sinai. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, if you're talking about the Qassam rockets, yes. But, they did have, at one point, the number was said anywhere between 100 and 300 of some light, more, accurate and with longer distance of a Syrian. I can't remember the nomenclature for it, but it was a Syrian missile. And those particular missiles had been smuggled in, but the Qassam rockets, these don't have warheads. They would bounce off a building. The only way they could kill you is if they actually hit your window on the side of your house and came in your house.
If you got impaled by it, probably, right?
Well, or if it hit something and ricocheted and you got the shrapnel, but it's not like a warhead that explodes. And the disproportionate nature of the attack by Israel is, obviously they're dropping, precision bombs, and they're dropping thousands of them. And those precision bombs are, minimum 250 pound, and 500 pound is a very common size. And those have warheads that actually explode, so they'll destroy, a 4-story building. And they'll cause, irreparable damage to the building. And they've, I think the number was thousands of I guess almost over. I guess there were over 1,000 homes destroyed and tens of thousands damaged in this last onslaught and massacre, really, that's happened. Now, the thing that they're going to say is that, well, we're not getting hurt is because of Iron Dome, and I can't stand to hear that, because Iron Dome's stopping less than 25% of these rudimentary and it costs us, and we just guarantee that we're going to give another, $600 million to Israel for this Iron Dome project. So we're getting to another $1 billion that we're going to give to a missile defense system that's 25%, I guess accurate or effective. And yet and look at the kind of missiles that it's effective against, very rudimentary missiles. So, I think it's a huge waste of money, and it only goes to show the hypocrisy of these guys are firing missiles because they were attacked way too many times over the past, let's say, 8 years, since 2006. There's been bombardment and just an onslaught against Gaza. And I said this over, at least last week, I'd said that, this is a move by Israel where they're going to try to basically reoccupy Gaza. And I think that's what we're seeing, is they're saying, look, we let you have your freedom. You didn't do anything with it. You put in a government that was a military-based government. There's been no peace, and we're taking it back. And we're going to go reoccupy it. And there's nothing you can do about it, because guess what? Everybody's busy. Anybody that could help you, Syria, they're busy. Iran, they're busy. Russia, they're busy. All your allies are busy. So guess what?
Yeah. Where's ISIS? Yeah, where's ISIS? But it should also be mentioned now that there's significant natural gas deposits that are being found right off the coast of Gaza. So clearly that's certainly a big issue, is the desire to get a hold of that. And of course, I'm sure the real estate, the seaside real estate, is probably something that they've been lusting after for some time. But now Hamas, okay, the very word Hamas is what is used in the Old Testament to basically mean evil. So how is it that this group would choose a name to represent themselves that essentially meant evil in Hebrew?
Well, I mean, here you've got a group of individuals who are obviously very anti-Israel. I mean, it's certainly a reasonable stance to take. I mean, if you were an indigenous population that was invaded and persecuted for over half a century, I think that you would probably have, hopefully you wouldn't give up and succumb to it. Unfortunately, the indigenous people of what's now called North America, and also South America, suffered greatly under the colonialist, imperialist nations that conquered and slaughtered the people that were indigenous on those two continents. So that's what we're seeing, is we're seeing a modern day conquistador movement, and it's being backed by our quote unquote allies that we have really sold our souls to. And become a leader, not just an active participant, but a leader in the death and destruction that occurs, on a daily basis, not just in Gaza, but around the world. Africa's suffered greatly in our lifetime. Southeast Asia has suffered greatly in our lifetime. obviously, and some of Eurasia has suffered greatly in our time, given the Afghan and Ukraine and other areas, on the eastern side of because of the Caspian Sea oil business that we were going after with, the countries like Azerbaijan and Georgia. There's been a lot of activity that has been instigated by the West's, thirst for resource revenue, as well as usury revenue, because once you can get them in your banking system, it's a usury-based banking system. A lot of people lose a lot of money to the actual loans that they take, and that's how you become under the thumb of the IMF. And thankfully, BRICS is one of the few organizations that's against it. Certainly, it's a David and Goliath story. Mm-hmm. So that's but definitely Gaza has every right to fight for their freedom. They certainly have had a country has been oppressed and invaded and occupied by foreigners that have been basically given a false. Look at I don't know if you're familiar with Fiddler on the Roof. Are you familiar with that play?
Sure.
And,
yeah, of course.
So
yeah.
Fiddler on the Roof is great. This is the propaganda that you got from the Zionist movement. The Zionist movement was started in Odessa, Ukraine. There are a lot of Zionist oligarchs that have architected the last overthrow. It's not the first one, but it's the most recent one. And that whole Odessa crew, that's the scene of the Fiddler on the Roof. And you have everybody wants to go to quote unquote Jerusalem. That's going to be their savior. They finally get to go back to their quote unquote homeland. And so that was what was drilled into the minds of the people that were starting the Zionist movement. They didn't have radio, they didn't have newspapers, but they did have art. And they created a play called Fiddler on the Roof. And the whole auspice of that is how evil the Russians were and how great it was to go to the homeland. So that's what was drilled into the minds of the individuals of the last century through this whole Schofield Reference Bible Zionist movement. And that's what these poor, indigenous people that they're calling Palestinians and Gazans that are dealing with the horrific colonialist invasion of their territory.
Yeah. We got some really big numbers tonight, Scott. Don't say it out loud, but
sure.
we did better than last week.
Oh, good.
We added a couple 100,000 at least. Looks like we added about, oh my God.
That's good. That's good.
A lot. All right. Well, you got some fans out there, obviously, that are enjoying that. So.
I'm sure it's your show. You've really, if you've got that kind of following, the best thing that we can continue to do is, we talked about you're self-funded, and look at these groups like the oligarchs are funding Glenn Greenwald with $250 million. Just think what we could do with $250 million, to create an underground television and radio network. And that's the kind of thing. Nobody's funding real independent, and that came from Pierre Omidyar, a good friend of George Soros. Funding this quote-unquote first look. I would call it, a look from the left. It's not a first look. These are very left tilted individuals that are building up this first look media outlet for Glenn Greenwald, and there's a lot of that influence, not just in American media, but also in Russian media. The Russians are dealing with their own, left wing and right wing, unfortunately. Both are unfortunate, but those types of individuals that I mentioned, Lignet earlier in the show, the Langley, basically the Langley intelligence group, those are the kinds of guys you got to pay attention to what's going on the people that are driving this sort of rhetoric for the parties that are the puppets for the oligarchs in our countries, respective countries. Okay,
listen, I got to jump in here.
Sure.
This was another incredible show, Scott. I really appreciate it. I can't get enough. I'm sure the listeners can't get enough. I know this is hard on you because it's late over there in Florida, but
That's fine.
you're going to have to keep coming back. I'm sorry. This is just the way it is. But before we end,
hopefully we can parlay this into our $250 million donors and do our own thing, because that's what we really need to do. And I'm not taking money from Koch brothers or Soros. I'm taking money from the guys that are willing to say the things that are the truth out there.
All right, well, listen, we're down to less than 2 minutes, so I just got to say a few things here real quick. I want to thank all the listeners. I want to thank everybody in chat. I hope you will join us again next week. Thank you, Sean, my producer, and thank you, Scott. You're an incredible guest. Please help us out, with your donations. Please join our Facebook page. Please join my Facebook page. Please check out my book on Amazon Kindle. It's Cities Under the Plane. It's $7, and if you buy the silly thing, you're not just helping me, but you're helping me spread the word and help to wake people up. I want to tell everybody that Major Tom is on Ground Control. Major Tom is the show coming up right after, so stick around for that. That's always a good show. Incredible night, incredible show, so much information, and everybody out there, again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and I just can't say enough. Thank you so much, and Scott, you're just an incredible guest. So, any final words you want to leave us with?
No, just keep it up. We are living in a new age of information, and it is get out there and learn as much as you can. There's a lot of folks that know a lot more than I do, and they're sharing it. And I try to share it on Facebook because it is probably the most interactive, and it has some of the best participants that I've been able to find. There is a lot going on LinkedIn, but I'm not as active there because I use that as more of an underground place to figure out things. And if I was more outspoken, I'd get a lot less connections there. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, anyway, what else can I say? Okay, well, there's our music. It's the end of the show. Again, this was an incredible 2 hours, and once again, thank you, everybody. Tune in next week. I'll be on the air Wednesday and Thursday morning at 2 a.m., and then, of course, again at this time next Thursday at 10 p.m. So thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless. Adios.